because, you're all here, so why wouldn't we? So I just want to start off by acknowledging the traditional owners. So I'm hosting this from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the mighty Kulin Nation, but I pay respects to elders in all of the different lands where we are this evening. Pay respects to elders past and present. I extend that respect to any First Nations comrades who may be with us here on this webinar this evening, and I will acknowledge that the land was stolen, never ceded, and that it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And because this is a Victorian Trades Hall Council event, I'm also going to do the statement of solidarity, which is an expression of the values that we bring to everything we do as trade unionists. We are union. We stand united as part of a great movement of workers. Our diversity is our strength. Our solidarity is our power. We respect and take care of each other. Prejudice and discrimination, including misogyny, racism, homophobia, and all other hatreds have no place in our movement. We rise together. Today and every day, we commit ourselves to achieving justice, fairness, equality, and dignity for all workers. Solidarity forever, comrades. So for those who don't know, my name's Will. I'm an Assistant Secretary at the Victorian Trades Hall Council, and I am here effectively because Danai, who would normally be doing this kind of meeting, is currently over at COP, at COP. So doing really important work on behalf of the trade union movement in the climate justice space. So I'm here tonight. With me here tonight is Charlie. Charlie is our organiser doing work in this space. Do you want to give a wave, Charlie, to those who don't know you?
G'day, comrades. Here I am in yellow.
And we also are incredibly pumped to have Ian Fairley here tonight, who's going to be giving us a lot of information, and we're very excited about that. So first, I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. The first thing is that tonight is being recorded so that we can share what happens tonight with those who can't make this time slot. So to make that recording really clear, we're going to just be putting everybody's mics on mute. We are hoping to have, 20, 25 minutes to field questions. And so when you're ready, please feel free to post your question in the chat, and then we will relay those questions through to Dr. Ian Fairley. So just by way of background, you'll all know that earlier this year, Peter Dutton proposed an energy policy which was about building nuclear reactors in Australia, and that includes in the Latrobe Valley. Now, we have absolutely no history of nuclear generation in this country, and therefore, as unions, we're very concerned about both the high cost of the project, but also the length of time. All the experts tell us that it's going to take a very long time for nuclear to get up and running here. And we're also concerned about the OH&S risk for workers who would be exposed to ionising radiation emitted from nuclear reactors and their waste sites. And we know that radiation-based health risks from the nuclear power industry have been proven internationally to be unavoidable, and they're very well documented. And we know that deaths and illnesses from the nuclear industry don't just result from big accidents like Chernobyl or Fukushima. Community and worker exposure to dangerous levels of radiation happens across all stages of the nuclear industry, including the mining, uranium mining, enrichment, fabrication, storing and recycling of fuel rods, normal reactor operations, as well as when they come to the end of their lifespan and they have to be decommissioned, and the management of radioactive waste. So workers and communities living and working in proximity to nuclear facilities are also exposed to ionising radiation at much higher levels than normal. So we think it's really important that workers are informed about the dangers of the nuclear power industry. And I know that some people here tonight will probably be tuning in from the Latrobe Valley and other parts of the country where the Liberal plan proposes that there be nuclear sites. And so that's why we are super pumped to have tonight Dr. Ian Fairley. Ian is a radiation biologist and independent consultant. He's worked as a consultant to the British government and was the scientific secretary of the British government's Commission for Investigation of Radiation Risks of Internal Emitters. Ian is also a very proud and committed trade unionist. He worked for the British Trades Union Congress for 14 years, and he worked as a research officer at the TUC's headquarters in London, working on legal and OH&S matters. So we know that he cares about workers and that he cares about workers' health and safety. And that's ultimately what we hear tonight. So unlike in Australia, the UK has a very long history of nuclear power generation, and there's plenty of evidence, therefore, to demonstrate that the industry does actually pose some serious health risks to workers and to communities. And that's why we're really happy to have Ian joining us all the way from the UK to share his knowledge with us. So he's going to talk us through many decades of work that he's had highlighting the risks of radiation exposure in the nuclear power industry. And then after he presents to us, there should be time for us to have questions. So, Ian, are you all right if I just hand over to you now and let you take it from here?
Sure, fine. I'll share my PowerPoint presentation. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sorry, just let me get this up a wee bit here.
That's all right. This is why I never do PowerPoint presentations, because this is the moment, really, where all the pressure's on, and then it gets all very difficult. Are you okay?
I know. Can you see the screen now? Can you see the PowerPoint presentation?
No.
Hang on. Share.
Yep, that's the one. There we go.
No, you can see it now, can you?
Yes.
How's that? Okay.
That's perfect, Ian. Fire away.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone, and I'll tell you right now, it's 8 o'clock in the morning here in London, in England, and it's bloody cold outside. It's 0 degrees. So you guys are having your summer, we're having our winter. This is going to be a very gentle introduction to radiation. Radiation is an extremely wide topic, and really we can only skim the surface a wee bit. What we can do is raise some important issues, which we could discuss further when we have questions and answers. I'd much rather try and answer your questions than be hidebound by my talk. Okay, on to the next topic. Well, what is radiation? It's a form of electromagnetic energy, but it's also the term encompasses particles, radioactive particles. So you really should discuss both of them. And for today, we're going to be discussing the particle form, because that's the kind that you gets inside you and is the most dangerous kind. Here we have various particles, alpha particles, beta particles, neutrons. These gamma rays are, as some of you might say, well, hang on, they're not particles. I put them in here just for completeness sake, to show you how they work, so to speak. Alpha particles won't go through a sheet of paper. Beta particles won't go through aluminum. Gamma goes everywhere. And neutrons are stopped also only by water. So these are some examples of radiation doses, just to give you a handle on what we mean by a dose of radiation. A millisievert is 1/1000th of a sievert of radiation. A sievert of radiation is 1 joule of energy and 1 kilogram of tissue, but we won't go into that for the time being. A CT scan is roughly speaking about 25 millisieverts, depending on exactly which part of the body is scanned. The background dose from natural sources in Australia, I understand, it's about 2 millisieverts a year. The public exposure limit, at least in the EU and in the United States, is 1 millisievert a year. And if you were to fly from Melbourne to London, it's a long flight, you would get 0.11 millisieverts. That gives you a rough idea of radiation exposures. As I say, there's two kinds of radiation. There's external radiation, for example, X-rays or gamma rays, and there's internal radiation. For example, when we breathe in radioactive gas radon in the air. Now, most people, when you talk about radiation, think immediately of X-rays. Probably the only, the closest that people have come to recognizing X-rays or radiation. However, take it from me that the more dangerous form is internal radiation. Not just from breathing in radioactive gases, but also from ingesting either by food or water, radioactive or radioactively contaminated food or radioactively contaminated water. The reasons why, well, this is a sketch of human body, and different radionuclides here on the left go to different organs here on the right, okay? Some radionuclides, for example, tritium, goes to almost every part of the body, we think. Although there's some evidence that it might be concentrated in the brain, we're not sure. So how do people get internal exposures? Well, from breathing in, as I say, also from eating it, and also via skin absorption. Well, just get this here. In radioactivity, and this is a sore point because most people find it difficult to understand the difference between radioactivity and radiation. And radioactivity occurs when a nucleus of an atom has too much energy. So it seeks to give off that energy in order to become stable. And how does it get rid of that energy? By emitting wave energy and or particles. The whole process is called radioactivity, and the energy is called radiation. Here's an example. It's the alpha decay. This is a schematic diagram of a uranium atom, and it will spontaneously emit an alpha particle. So here are some examples of some radionuclides, just to bring you up to speed a little bit about it. Here they are here, radon, as I've mentioned. It's got a half-life of about 3.8 days, mainly emits alphas. There's iodine-131, a half-life of about 8 days. Tritium, which is the radioactive isotope of hydrogen, as you see here, H here. It's got a much longer half-life of just over 12 years. Strontium-90, which goes to bone, of 28 years. Cesium, which goes to muscle, 30 years. And you've got radium, which has got a rather naughty half-life of 1,600 years. And plutonium, 24,000 years. So there's a huge range here of half-lives. And then depending on how long the half-life is, you have different dangers. For example, radon is dangerous immediately, whereas plutonium lasts for millennia. There's two effects of radiation. The first is immediate cell killing, and the second kind is later probabilistic or stochastic effects. What does probabilistic mean? It means that we can't be certain when the effects will occur, but we can judge how likely they are to occur. Now, unfortunately, after nuclear accidents, for example, where radiation gets into the news, journalists always talk about immediate cell killing effects. They never talk about the later effects. What are the later effects? Well, there's a bunch of them. Cancer predominantly, various forms of cancer, which we'll come on to in a minute, and also cardiovascular diseases and genetic diseases, of course. They are the more difficult ones to pin down, but believe you me, they are the more important ones. This chart here compares the different kinds, different effects of radiation. There's cell killing. How many? Well, many. An example of cell killing is if you've been out in the sun too much and you get red skin, that's the cell killing effect, because what's happened is that the sun has killed off the outer layers of your skin and you get sunburn. And the doses, well, quite high. So we're talking about high skin doses if you get sunburn. Is there a threshold? It's difficult to say. What happens is if the dose increases, the severity increases. So, what would you believe? Hello? David, is that David? Hang on, I'm in the middle of a Zoom right now. Okay. Sorry about that. As the dose increases, the severity increases. So that means that if you stay out in the sun longer, you get a deeper sunburn or a worse sunburn. Okay, probabilistic effects, on the other hand, it's only one cell that needs to be affected, one cell. That's how cancers are a start. The dose is very small, well below 100 millisieverts. Threshold? No, there isn't one. And what happens as the dose increases? The probability increases. Now, an example of a probabilistic effect is when there's people who smoke. And the point is that if you smoke one cigarette, the chances of you getting lung cancer will increase a little bit. Not right away, perhaps, but your chances of getting a cancer increases. That's a probabilistic effect, okay? Now, I'm going to talk about the modeling of radiation's effects. The thing about radiation, of course, is you can't hear it, feel it, see it, smell it, or touch it. It's invisible. It's a rather nebulous concept. So you have to model its effects, usually computer models. And there's various kinds of models which are suggested. And it's an important matter. And I'm afraid that there are views are very divided on it throughout the world. Those people who are in favor of nuclear power tend to think that the radiation model used is that radiation actually can be good for you at low doses. Whereas those people who are opposed take the opposite point of view. I am amongst the latter. So here are some models. On the x-axis here, we've got radiation dose. The dose is increasing. And the y-axis here, the risk involved. Now, there are various models you can use. The one that's normally used by most radiation authorities is the blue line here, a straight linear relationship between dose and effect. But there are people who think this is the effect. In other words, there's a threshold, and below that threshold, it's even good for you. Well, that's a lot of nonsense for many, many, many reasons. So for the time being, we are using this linear dose effect relationship. You'll often find this in the future and your understanding of it. Now, what does the evidence show? Well, this is what the evidence shows. These are solid cancers in children, and each one of those dots here is the result of a study. And as you can see, these doses are quite small, all of them below 150 millisieverts, 170 millisieverts. And you can see the risk, the dose-risk relationship is linear. And these are actual data points So you'll often hear pundits saying that there are no effects of radiation below 50 millisieverts or whatever. Well, yes, there is. Here's the actual evidence. Now, just to sum up about the LNT model, linear no threshold model, there's a lot of evidence for it, especially the INWORK study, which I'll come to later. There's theoretical support, which supports it, which if you discuss how radiation's effects arise, then there is long, strong support for the LNT model. Most international authorities support it. And why is it important? Because it means that there's no safe dose of radiation. No matter how low you go in terms of dose, there's always some ill effect. Let me give you an example, excuse me, of what one of my colleagues gave is how you can describe the stochastic effects of radiation. It's like being given a negative lottery ticket. So if you're exposed to radiation, at the same time, you're given a lottery ticket, but a negative one. And if your number comes up, you die. A negative lottery ticket. That's what you've got when you get radiation. So what does that mean for us? That means we have to have a lot of respect for radiation and be very wary of it. And I think we should oppose any proposals to increase exposures to radiation. I'm going to jump now to the question of nuclear power. I'm aware that I'm jumping around a wee bit, but given the time, just have to cover the main topics. Does nuclear power provide an answer to global warming? The reason I pose that question is because many people, unfortunately, especially politicians, think that it does. Well, it doesn't. This is an example from Mark Jacobson in Stanford in the States of the grams of carbon dioxide emitted per kilowatt hour of electricity produced. So for wind, there's 5 grams per kilowatt hour. For concentrated solar, and you can see the figures here, okay? Well, where does nuclear? Nuclear is nowhere, man. It has very high levels of CO2 released per kilowatt hour of electricity. By the way, this figure does not include nuclear waste. Why? Well, because we don't really have very many examples of where nuclear waste is properly treated. If you were to figure nuclear waste in here, this figure would be even higher. Now, it's true that coal is even worse, but really nobody talks about coal anymore, certainly not in Europe anyway. And it's really the debate is about the renewables here. And that's what we should be going for. Now, I'm going to talk about the increase in childhood leukemias amongst populations near nuclear power stations. In Australia, you don't have any. You're very lucky. Well done. But in the rest of the world, yeah, there are many. There's over 400 nuclear power reactors in the world. And funny enough, there are, roughly speaking, well, over 60 studies which indicate increased levels of childhood leukemias near nuclear facilities around the world. 60. And this is well documented. The problem is that the pundits, in particular, UNSCARE and ICRP and the IAEA, refuse to accept this evidence. The best evidence is the study in 2008 by the German government. And this is a KIC study. KIC is an acronym meaning Kinderkrebs and Kern, sorry, my German's terrible, nuclear power stations, which found a 100%, 120% increased risk of child leukemias and a 60% increase of solid cancers near all German NPPs. Now, when this study came out, there was a lot of denial, especially in Germany and in France. They just didn't want to know this. And it led to a number of other countries doing their own studies because they didn't believe the German study. Well, these, I'll come back to them in a minute. These are the studies in Germany, Britain, France, and Switzerland. They all stands for the number of observed cases within 5 kilometers of NPPs. So there's 34 childhood leukemias in Germany near nuclear power facilities, okay? But you only expected about 24. Britain, France, Switzerland. Now, if you pull all these studies, which is what you have to do to get the numbers up, you find that there's a 37% increase in childhood leukemias, and that figure is statistically significant. In other words, it's not just due to chance, it's a real observation, okay? Now, this is a diagram from the actual study which showed this, and it shows you the distance from the nuclear facility in kilometers. And as you got closer and closer to the facility, the risk went up and up and up exponentially. Okay? This is what the study actually, by Katch et al. In 2008 showed, that the closer you get, the higher the risks. Now, you're going to say, well, why is that? And I'm going to show you why we think this has occurred, why these increases have occurred. This shows you, this is the data of the noble gas concentrations emitted from a German nuclear power station, Gundremmingen, in 2005. Now, this is September 19th, September 20th. These are the days. And this shows you huge spikes in the levels of the noble gases emitted. Here, for example, when the reactors were working normally, the figure is about 3 actually, 3 becquerels per cubic meter, and then boom, it goes up. Now, why is that occurring? That's when they open up the reactor and depressure the reactor, when they're taking the old fuel out and putting the new fuel in. In other words, you get this huge spike. The difference between here and here is a factor of, well, 500. A huge spike in emissions from the facility. Now, this chart that I'm showing here is quite rare because nowhere else has it ever been shown. Because nuclear power operators tend to hide this. They don't want you to know about this. This is the Achilles heel in many ways of nuclear power stations. Is that they have to open up and they have to discharge these high concentrations of radioactive gases. By the way, although it says noble gas, this is also a proxy for tritium. Both are emitted at the same time. Excuse me. Now, very quickly, I'm moving on to another facet here, and that is what happens when you close a research reactor. I put this slide in because at Lucas Heights, or Looking Heights, in Australia, near Sydney, you have got some research reactors which are closed down, I understand. Well, they're going to be emitting these gases for long times into the future. This is an example from Canada, as it turns out, but the same thing is going to be applicable to in Australia. In 1985, a research reactor in Ontario was closed down, and this shows you that of the decay for iron, 55. That's it here. Shows you the decay. So after about, well, roughly speaking, 100 years, there's not much left. That's for iron. It's the same also for cobalt. That's the yellow line. But for other radionuclides, for example, take nickel 63. Wow, that's 1,000 years. And you can take the example of nickel 59, it's 1,000,000 years. So what I'm getting at here is that the decay of the radionuclides in a research reactor take a long, long time. This is a research reactor in Canada, but it's going to be the same in Australia when you shut down the reactors, okay? Now, I'm going to jump here a wee bit. The question is, that many people ask is, can we do just with, or satisfy our electricity needs just with renewables? And the answer, yes, we can. There's no need for nuclear, and the renewables can do it all by themselves. There's roughly speaking about 100 studies around the world which show this. And by the way, it's not just satisfying our electricity needs. The renewables can satisfy 100% of our energy needs. Now, maybe not 100%, maybe 99% or 98%. There are some examples where it's very difficult. For example, very large trucks, for example. It's very difficult to have them powered by electricity. But apart from a few instances, and also aircraft, apart from those, the renewables can do it. Now, I'm going to finish there and try and answer your questions. By the way, can I say that I'm very aware that I've skated over quite a few topics here this morning. The thing is that radiation and nuclear power is a vast topic, and the best you can do is sort of open up some issues for discussion rather than cover them all in one PowerPoint over 20 minutes or so. But I'll leave it there and stop and try and answer some of your questions.